I have been speaking about call, trial, return, and Bardo, 4 stages from Carl Jung, and mapping them to call being the spring, dawn, trial being the day or noon or daytime, return being associated with the fall, harvest, sunset, dusk, and Bardo associated with night, winter. Bardo is pure yin, purely receptive. We've been talking about this idea that all you're here to do is be receptive to whatever's arising, whatever thought or emotion or plan or judgment or action or viewpoint or sensation, and the mind wants there to be more than that. It wants to be more than just receptive, it wants to be expressive. So the practice is to constantly notice and correct ourselves. But I wanted to add a new wrinkle. So at the call, the question I've been talking about is whether we accept confusion, but really in a large way, it's about accepting powerlessness. And we're going to call that APC. And if we don't, then we are going to probably try to assert control, aggression, attitude, attachment, adjustment. And things will either go away or they won't go away. But if they go our way, we're still going to probably feel a little uneasy because we're attached to keeping things that way. Attached to having a certain image, attached to having people behave a certain way, see us a certain way, our own mind seeing us a certain way. Usually we want to see us positively, but it may also be an attempt to have our mind see us negatively. That's the trial, which of course sets us up for whether we can pass judgment or mount a defense. And that's typically negative adaptive child, negative free child. Sphere 7 versus Sphere 8 on the Tree of Life. And then that message, if we're passing judgment or mounting defense, gets pushed into the gap because the mind is running out of time. And also there's a belief that if it can enter that purely receptive state and be accepted, it would become true. It's a belief that if we can pass judgment or mount a defense, that God or Spirit or the Tao or something in that Bardo, that winter, that place of no time, no boundaries, no direction, somehow that's going to make it manifest, and the judgment will become true, or the defense will be accepted. But of course, the Bardo is purely receptive, so it's not there to pass judgment. It's not there to accept or reject a defense. It's just there to listen. And if we are in that state while here, in space and time, it's a state of samadhi, or a state of awakening. This just makes it a little more real. And we're going to come back to this chart in a moment. So, just have a visualization, as I've shown in other videos. Bardo is all around us. We enter the call, and then that pushes us. If we don't accept powerlessness and confusion, we're trying to assert control as the roller coaster goes up and down. And then when we hit the return, right there, then we're going to be passing judgment or mounting a defense. So if you see that you're passing judgment or mounting a defense, it means that the next call, instead of passing that judgment along, or passing that defense along, mounting of the defense along, you want to mind yourself or your future self to accept powerlessness and confusion. You see desire and aversion here, some kind of gripping or rejecting or an agenda, then that means you didn't accept confusion and powerlessness. You didn't have a beginner's mind there. Gareth Hill is a Jungian writer, and as you know, call, trial, return, Bardo is from Jung. So if you associate the movement out of the Bardo as out of the womb, that's the movement out of the static feminine. And when we have our terrible twos or our teenage rebellion, that's when we have our dynamic masculine. And then during that period where we may or may not be able to assert control, we may find ourselves drawn to static masculine structure, like could be work, job, military, some kind of legal system. It's something that is trying to stand in for the static feminine, but give us a role to play where we have some level of being part of it. The static feminine might have felt suffocating, and the static masculine can feel suffocating too, but it holds out a promise that it's going to be something different. The stage that most of us don't get to, most of us, we spend our final times, final days, focusing on the judgment or mounting a defense for our life. But there's a playfulness that can arise called the dynamic feminine. And that's allowing us to return to the static feminine through a watery transition, through a surrender. So it's interesting to look at it because, well, I guess the way to say it is the dynamic masculine is trying to move away from something, move away from static feminine and toward the static masculine, whereas the dynamic feminine is trying to move away from that rigidity of the static masculine and re-engage the static feminine again. You can look at this as the course of a young woman who then becomes a mother, but you can also look at it as any of us who are trying to return to Mother Earth or return to a state of oneness or to die in peace. And so when we're uncomfortable with not having powerlessness and confusion, we're not comfortable in the womb, we're not comfortable in that early bond with the mother, then the dynamic masculine rebels, but it feels lonely, so it doesn't rebel only, it also tries to join the static masculine. Ultimately, that doesn't bring us any happiness because whether or not we can assert control, it's not going to be satisfying. There's going to be this fear or active action to pass judgment. So it's fear of being judged or the action of judging. And that may lead us to try to mount a defense of ourselves. But at the dynamic feminine, we let all of that go. And we're just in a state of surrendering. We're letting the yin take us over. And that's when we may encounter samadhi, or when we may leave our physical body and enter oneness with the